Kia ora koutou. Mr Speaker, I'm pleased to take a short call on this electoral amendment bill. I'd echo the comments already made by other speakers about the importance of this process and the value of it. That each 3 years we investigate our electoral processes, we evaluate them, we look for ways we might make them better. That's an entirely appropriate process. It's one that perhaps helps to reassure people about the integrity of our electoral system, acknowledging that things do change over time, and generally it is a good process. And it's particularly important in the context of the decline in participation and voting that we have seen over the last several elections. At one time, New Zealand, despite not having any law that compels people to vote, nevertheless had higher turnouts than many countries indeed where there was a compulsion, where it was legally required that people voted. We have slipped a long way from that expectation about turnout, and I think that's something we can't simply put down to voter apathy. I think we have to think much more about the level of cynicism and the reason why people may have become disillusioned with the political process and seek to address those in a much more real and a much more honest and open way. So historically, some of the people most, or rather least likely to participate in general elections are young people. And I think that the provisions in this bill to accommodate the electronic enrolment, online enrolment, will go some small way towards balancing that. The so-called digital natives are accustomed to doing most things online, and enabling people to enrol for the first time or some subsequent time entirely online, I think, is a good thing. For quite some time, people have been able to amend their details, their enrolment details online. We see no reason why you wouldn't extend that, and I think that's one of the most positive steps in the bill. We still have another conversation to have, perhaps, about the desirability or indeed the possibility of online voting. That would be a more complex and arguably a more controversial step. But for the moment, enabling enrolment to happen online is a good and positive thing, and we do commend that aspect of the bill. So the provisions around disclosure of loans we think is also positive. Parties do take out loans to fund their campaigns, and typically they would repay them. Having the loophole existing, of course, that enabled a party to accept the loan and then have that loan written off but not have it recorded against their income for the election, we think is undesirable. In a perfect world it wouldn't happen. Parties would declare honestly the money that they had in by whatever means. But of course recent history tells us that that level of integrity is not always in evidence. And so I do see that those provisions in the bill are certainly worthwhile. Some of the detail may be arguably amended through the Select Committee process, but the general principle of closing that very obvious and very unfortunate loophole is something that we do support and think that's a good thing to do. So one of the recommendations of the Justice and Electoral Committee inquiry into the election looked at the issue of or proposed rather, that the Electoral Commission should liaise with the Ministry of Education about incorporating ongoing and comprehensive civics education into the New Zealand school curriculum. And while I can recognise that's somewhat outside the ambit of this bill, I'd just like to put on the record that we would wholeheartedly support that. We think that it's very strange that our young people can go through an entire education from year 5 to 16, 17, 18 and never be sat down and given some good basic information, some education about how our electoral system works, how our parliament works, how our basic democratic systems and processes work. It seems a significant gap in our education system. And I'm aware of such things, what was it called, Kids Voting program that popped up some years ago. A very positive program, well received. It exposed probably something in excess of 100,000 young people at schools participated in a voting process and learnt a fair bit along the way. But we would see a time when we think it should be taken as a given that we embed that education into our standard educational curriculum. Again, it might go some way to empowering people, to enabling people to see the value and the importance of participating in our electoral processes every 3 years. So the bill makes some minor changes to the business of Māori enrolment in the Māori electoral roll. We think it's unfortunate that this bill doesn't go further, and we do agree it's long been Green Party policy that Māori should not have to wait for a 5-yearly census cycle to move from one role to the other, from the general to the Māori or the other way around. And it's an opportunity missed perhaps that this bill does not engage with that. There's mention that the terms of reference did not enable it. I do think, however, that a stronger recommendation could have come through, and I do think it would have been an opportunity to enable Māori, people of Māori descent, to have at least the option of moving one way or the other on the roll in conjunction with each 3-yearly electoral cycle. It seems perverse that really it's only at every second election in reality that Māori have that option to go one way or the other. I think the arguments proposed in the document, in the inquiry document, suggestions that it might create unequal electoral systems with some voters exerting more sway, if you like. The proposition that changes in electoral boundaries could leave very high or very low numbers. I think that's very much overstated. I really don't believe that you would get sufficient movement in a role in any given year, in any given election cycle, to have any significant impact on numbers within the elections. I don't see any way that it would skew the outcome, even if somebody set out tactically to endeavour to do that. I suspect there'd be sufficient either opposition or simply inertia that would prevent any compromising of the integrity of that. I do think allowing Māori the right to move one way or the other each 3-yearly cycle would be something we need to contemplate and aim to do at some future point, and hopefully not too far into the future. So I'd also say that this, in terms of what's lacking from this bill, again, a missed opportunity. It would have been nice to see included in this a reversal of the truly appalling change to the electoral law that was made that was instigated by the gentleman now departed from this place, and I dare I say it somewhat unlamented, Mr Paul Quinn, with his electoral disqualification of sentenced prisoners amendment. This would have been an excellent opportunity to put aside that entirely meaningless, punitive, unhelpful piece of legislation that even its principle could not defend, that no individual speaking on its behalf could give a substantive reason why we would do that, to deny every single sentenced prisoner the right to vote. No matter, it was a ridiculous piece of legislation. This would have been a very good opportunity to repeal it, to take that embarrassment off our books, and it's unfortunate that that hasn't been included in this. The Attorney General, and at the time that bill went through the House, noted that it would introduce irrational inconsistencies in the law. He found it unjustifiably inconsistent with the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act. Unfortunately, we were saddled with it, and I think this would have been a good opportunity to put it aside, to remove it. That's an opportunity missed. So on a brighter note, there is some considerable value in this bill. Our disappointment, I have to say, and our very genuine disappointment, and perhaps it refers back to Mr Little's comments earlier about how little time has been allowed to get the changes put in place. The lack of attention to the recommendations about accessibility that were very strongly made and well made by the inquiry, but sadly have not been picked up by the drafters of this bill. We understand, or we infer perhaps, that there is not necessarily any objection to these accessibility provisions being picked up, but that the issues of timing perhaps, or even cost, I don't know, have meant that they're not included in this bill. My colleague will speak more to that later, but for the moment the Greens we're supportive of what this piece of legislation sets out to do. We'll seek to make it even better in the select committee process, but we do look forward to it going through the House. Kia ora.
Alfred Naro.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to take a short call on this electoral amendment bill. And Mr Speaker, I suppose it's appropriate that we celebrate women's suffrage of 120 years, and particularly Kate Shepherd, who again led the opportunities where women could vote, world leading, and it's a great opportunity because out of there the principles were to be accessible, to be eligible, and to allow for women to vote, but also to Mr Kate Shepherd and Mr Speaker, the important aspect of this bill actually wants to take on those key principles. One of the things, and I was part of the Select Committee, for the Just Electoral Select Committee, I want to honour and acknowledge, all of the members, and in particular the Charles Chevelle that was here at that time, and also the Honourable Leanne Dalziel.